Wait, okay, there. Oh, there's the lights, camera, action. Travis, here we go.
Yes. What up? What up,
I'm,
dude?
I'm so excited. I get to hang
You
out with
better have
Travis.
us on the way.
That's right. She's coming home tonight.
It's always
So,
exciting when the missus comes home.
yeah, my wife's been gone a week. We have a
Oh,
dear friend in Montana who is really sick, and she went up there to hang out with him and his wife, and I hope he makes it, but it's not looking real good.
yeah, I'm
So
sorry, man.
this whole sickness and death thing really sucks. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Um, well, I mean, that is what makes the gospel relevant.
Well,
The
without it, that's
gospel
right.
is irrelevant once people stop dying.
Yeah.
And you have to do more than just do something like drugs and medicine to make our bodies live longer or put our consciousness into a computer, which is what a lot of transhumanists do. You got to do more than that. That ain't going to cut it because you got to keep the universe from running out of energy.
Well,
So,
that's true, but consciousnesses aren't physical, so it ain't ever going to work. Never, ever are they going to be able to do that.
well, if they, not when I say consciousness, I mean our consciousness kind of infused into a computer. Kind of like, did you see Captain America Winter Soldier?
No.
It's my favorite Marvel movie.
Okay.
And there's a character. I don't have to get into all the details, but there's a character whose consciousness was put into a computer, so it essentially has eternal life. As
Okay.
long as no one just destroys the system or something, he can just live on. And that's what transhumanists want to do. They want to get to the point where your own consciousness gets infused into a computer so that you just are conscious forever.
Well, that's in that movie is as close to them ever being able to really do it. It's not going to happen.
If you can do it, the only way you can do it is if consciousness is not material.
How can you do it if consciousness is not material? I would think you can't do it if consciousness is only material. I mean, is immaterial.
If consciousness is immaterial, you're saying that you can't infuse it into a computer system.
That's right.
Yeah,
Unless,
I would say the opposite is true. If you can do it, you can only do it if consciousness is immaterial.
so God,
Because you're basically saying that my consciousness transcends my body. So there's no necessary connection between this matter here and the consciousness that I could put into something else.
well, we did that. We did that several shows on near-death experiences,
Mm-hmm.
and we kind of provided a lot of evidence that our consciousness and our soul and our memory and our ability to perceive is not physical. And
Yes.
so, unless God gives us the recipe for how we can take our soul and embody and soul a non-biological object like a computer, it seems to me we're stuck. We're never going to be able to do that.
Oh, now the how, you're absolutely right. I would agree that that's a tall order. But the metaphysics has to be there to even begin to play with the idea that because if my consciousness can be somehow infused into a computer, that means it's not reducible to this.
Right. But I would think that if consciousness were simply material, that it was some kind of manifestation of, they could reduce it to material, then you would need some kind of modulator, some kind of modem to write our program into a computer program. That seems like that would be easier to me than than if we are immaterial. If we are immaterial, they're screwed. They're never going to be able to put our soul into a computer.
I grant that if we're just matter in motion, you can take some aspect of the brain, like our DNA code, and if you could go and like see where memories are stored or something, put those memories onto a computer and say, look up Travis's memories, and you might get a blueprint of like all my memories or something.
Right.
That's not consciousness.
Right. That's right.
Consciousness has to be, minimally a first person perspective.
That's
where
right.
the system is thinking about itself and thinking about its environment and so forth. And so I would grant you'd be able to download some aspect of my brain, like a data chip. But the only way you could put my consciousness in a computer is if I'm more than what's going on in the brain and the data chip.
Okay. Yeah. But it's all fantasy anyway. We're never going to be able to do it. Yeah. Because this whole, I heard somebody call it the sound and light show. The consciousness is more than just thinking about things. I mean, we could be in a zero stimulation vat, where there's no sound, no light. The temperature of the water would be exactly the same temperature as our body temperature, and there would be zero input from the outside world, and we can still think. We would still have the ability to we would still be conscious. We just wouldn't be perceiving anything. But I think of consciousness as both the ability to think and reflect and the sound and light show.
Okay. Maybe you've said this before and I just forgot, but do you think that in the interim state when we die, it's said that we're face to face with the Lord, but not much is said about the interim state. Do you think that we actually perceive, or do we just sort of behold the Lord, but we don't really do much else until we're reunited with our bodies?
I think that those near-death experiences have a lot of utility. They tell us a lot of stuff. And it seems like people who floated up out of their body and had an experience and then went back into their body, that seems to be evidence that what they experienced was between the time that they left their body and the time they came back. It was a continuum. And so, often they see loved ones, they see God, they see some external world that is real to them, and I believe is real, is factually real. Mm-hmm. And so I think there's something going on. I don't believe in soul sleep, I guess. I think that we keep going immediately. What do you think?
Yeah. Well, I honestly don't know, but for years now, I've been thinking that, like, I don't know if we're going to be interacting with each other at all in the hereafter. So I tend to think that in these near-death experiences, that is the Lord. It's subjective and veridical, but it's more visionary than concretely experiential. The exceptions being when you have the soul floating above and it's seeing like doctors work on the body and that sort of thing. I think that's veridical and real, and it's a basic experience. But like if I ascend into heaven and I encounter my relatives that are up there, they don't have bodies either. So how am I perceiving them?
Yeah, I don't have an answer for that, but they were in the near-death experiences, the people, excuse me, that meet them or that they see, they are recognizable. And they say that they look like what they looked like at their best. So like
Right.
25 or 30, or in my case, how I look right now. But
You are a
uh,
handsome man. You are a handsome man.
thank you, Travis. You too, brother. You too.
I don't even try.
So somehow they seem to they're perceived as having a body.
Yeah.
I've never heard about. I would love to interview somebody and say, well, what were they wearing? Did they have clothes on? What did the clothes look like? But can we?
The reason I say what I just said is that would, if my speculation is speculation, what I'm giving you,
Yeah.
because I don't know, but if my speculation is correct, then that experience where you meet the beloved departed would be a vision. It's veridical in the sense that God is communicating something true to you, that your loved ones are in the afterlife and they're doing okay. But it's not a concrete experience that you're actually having with other souls, because in the state that we're going to be in without a body, you wouldn't be able to perceive them as they are because they don't have bodies.
But they are perceiving them and they're communicating with
They're,
them.
they're perceiving them because God is giving them a vision of the perception of them. So it's a vision that God has given you that's veridical because it is God that's giving it to you. So he's communicating a truth to you. But you yourself are not actually experiencing the other soul objectively.
That seems kind of ad hoc. Why do you think that?
Because they don't have bodies. And so it would be impossible for you. I can sense a group of doctors working on my body as I float above it because it's bodies that I'm perceiving working on my body.
Mm-hmm.
But I wouldn't be able to perceive a soul because a soul by definition is invisible. And therefore, for me to interact with a departed loved one in the hereafter before the resurrection, it would have to be, I literally cannot conceive how that would be possible. So my speculative theory or hypothesis is that when people have near-death experiences, they're really having a near-death experience. Their soul really did leave their body. And when they're having that experience, however, with another soul that you by definition cannot see, but they're seeing them, they're perceiving them
Right.
in a physical form of some kind, that would be God directly giving you a vision of that person. But let's say a gazillion years from now, when we all have resurrected bodies, and let's say you died before me, and then I have a near-death experience where I float up and I see the dazzling, dashing young man that we see on the camera right now. I see that form of you. And then a gazillion years from now, when we're both in our resurrected bodies, and I said, remember when we interacted before I actually died? I would imagine that you might say, no, I don't have that memory, because it was not actually objectively you interacting with me. It was the Lord giving me a vision of you, telling me that you're basically the vision is a dream, if you will, that I had, wherein the Lord is basically communicating to me, your departed loved ones are okay. This is what Ross is thinking of you. So there's truth in the vision. It's veridical. My soul really has departed from my body. All of that is true, but it's not actually you I'm interacting with, precisely because you don't have a body. I can't perceive you until you actually get your body.
Okay, that's interesting, and I hadn't really thought that through. But here's another possibility. So we talked about how really bizarre it is that as we are just a soul and we leave our body, that we're able to perceive anything at all anyway, because we don't have eyeballs and optic nerves and a brain to analyze the nerve data to do anything with, right?
Right.
So maybe what's happening is we are really interacting with the person, which I would like to believe that, but somehow we perceive it as a body. It's 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 whatever it is, but we're so used to seeing bodies that when we see a soul or perceive that soul, we see it as a body.
Mhm.
Um, I mean, all bets are off as to what's going on there anyway, because we just can't. We don't understand it.
Yeah.
It's
Well, I
spiritual.
mean, there's some
It's
people who believe some people who believe in an interim body.
right.
So
Yeah.
I die and I
Okay.
basically get an interim body, and then that body gets shed away, I guess. But that's always been a very complicated. That to me just seems complicated. If you get your interim body, then why not just keep that body and not worry about the resurrection? It would seem like the resurrection becomes unimportant at that point. It is precisely because I'm disembodied that I'm not completely me.
Well, I think the point would be maybe it's some kind of suboptimal unit. It's like it's not a resurrection body. It's just it's a it's a used car that you get in between the two new cars, and it gets you along. But it seems like the resurrection body,
Real, yeah, yeah,
the permanent body that we're going to have, through the end of time, seems to be a physical body the new in the new Jerusalem, the new earth, that
oh,
we don't know
absolutely.
if it's going to be like Jesus's body here on earth where he could walk through walls and stuff, but still was physical in some bizarre way. But I can see that maybe that's what would happen. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, we are speculating. As a hylomorphist, there is a kind of a wrinkle in all of this because Travis Campbell just is the composition of matter and form.
Mm-hmm.
At death, my form and my matter will separate. That's why I'm not alive. The form is the form, or the soul is the form of the body. So it's the active principle of the body. So my body can't move around without my soul.
Mm-hmm.
So once that matter form composite splits, and a strong implication is that I, as such, don't exist. And so there is a kind of consciousness that survives because I'm more than my body. And that's the form. But a form without a body is not really the person. So it's kind of like there's some Catholic philosophers that are strongly arguing that during the interim period, it's not really you that is in the heavenlies face to face with the Lord. It is simply a part of you. Now, one of the reasons why the Catholic philosophers are heavily debating this, and we've had Gavin Kerr on, and he's in this debate too. He's defending the traditional view that it's the person that survives. The
Mm-hmm.
reason this is a Protestant can kind of go either way on this. It doesn't really hurt your theology either way, but it does hurt Catholic theology because what's being punished in purgatory if it's not you? I mean, in other words, if
Right.
you
Right.
if you're
Yeah.
disembodied, then the whole point of purgatory is to purge you of all sins, so that you bear temporal consequences for all the sins that you commit. Those who go to hell must bear the burden forever. Those who go to purgatory bear that burden for a long duration.
Right.
Now, if it's not you that's in purgatory being punished from those sins, then you are not being sanctified,
Right.
in which case purgatory is a useless gesture. The whole point of purgatory is to cleanse the person, but if the person is not there to be cleansed, then purgatory is a waste of time. It doesn't. You'd have to wait till your resurrection before you go through purgatory. But all are agreed that at the resurrection we're glorified and we're free from the presence of sin forever.
Yeah.
It's a real interesting conundrum. If you're going to be a hylomorphous, um, there may be implications to it that hurt the Catholic understanding of the interim state.
So I have a couple of responses to that. I think a lot of this, all of these arguments, you have to get to, you have to define everything really precisely.
Sure.
And what do we mean by the person? Is a person the mind and the body, or is a person just the mind? I'm going to take the side that the person, in this case, there's enough of the person in a near-death experience to, or in purgatory, if we believe in that whatever happens there has the same effect on them as if they were enfleshed and as if they had a body. Because think about, we'll go back to the near-death experiences again. If everybody who comes back from a near-death experience say that it changes them, it seems like it changes them in the same way a traumatic physical experience would change them. Many of them come back and they're different people. Their priorities are completely different. They have knowledge, absolute knowledge that they will survive their body. Many of them are motivated to do things in ways that they never were before. They have memories of the experience. So the effect that it has on them is just like it was a physical experience. So I'm going to argue that is the person there, enough of the person there to be affected by the experience. And if that's what goes to purgatory, and goes through purgation, that's enough for the person to be changed and transformed.
Right. I mean, the more traditional Catholics would have to argue along those lines.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Speaking of which, you had some other things you wanted to say about Catholicism.
Well, yeah, I think, I've been going through these OCIA classes because I don't want to have ignorant opinions, and I have plenty of those, but I didn't want to do that here. And I feel like there's a lot of things I'm learning that has changed my faith for the better and enriched it and deepened it. And I will never be a mindless Protestant anymore, but I will be a Protestant because there's too many red flags on some other things. But we talked already about how powerful the history of the church is if you study it. Now, it's not only Catholics that study that, but it seems like only in some branches of Protestantism where you can just skate right over that and even brag that doesn't matter so much. And
Right.
and the Catholic Church really puts a lot of emphasis on ideas like, things like, this is what people have been doing for 2,000 years, and we're connected all the way back to the disciples. And I find there's a lot of power in that. It grounds me in a way that I think is really important to me now. I never thought about it much. And one of the other ways that is powerful is studying some of the saints, some of the average normal people who did unbelievably exemplary, wonderful things and had a life where they really served Christ. And I find those to be very motivating, and I get a lot of comfort from that. And I think one time in all my life as a Protestant have I heard a sermon on a past church figure, where the sermon was just about that person and their exemplary life. And I think that's a big mistake. Now, one of the problems with the Catholic Church is they don't have very good sermons about anything. They're like 8 minutes long, and it's basically just a good introduction. But I think the Protestant church in general could really benefit from a tighter tie to history and really talking about some of these wonderful people that are just average people like us who led these amazing lives for Christ.
I agree. Now, I will say that traditionally, now that I'm the teacher of the little kids in our church. So
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
I don't do this now, but for years, I would do a Reformation Sunday deal where I would do a presentation on a reformational figure, but I always had plans, and I may still do this because we're about to make some changes in our church, so who knows what's going to happen. But I do want to go before the Reformation. I've always wanted to do something on Aquinas for the church, but that's Sunday school. It's not a sermon. I don't think I've ever thought about preaching a sermon on a historical figure, but I certainly wouldn't be against anything like that, especially if you're doing something that's of historical significance anyway.
Yeah.
Like the White Horse Inn, Michael Horton's organization, they're having a conference in May where they're celebrating the Nicene Creed, because this is the what is the anniversary? Not the seven. It's the 1700th.
Yeah, I think it's 1700. Yeah, because Nicaea was 325, the council.
That's right. It's the 1700th anniversary of that council this year is. And so they're celebrating that. And what I love about Michael Horton is he is so historically grounded as a Protestant scholar. He's got a new book coming out with Crossway, and it's just basically sola scriptura in the church fathers. Doing any exegesis of scripture to defend it or anything. And anybody who is wrestling with the issue of Protestantism, I'm sure that Dr. Horton's book on sola scriptura is going to be excellent, but they need to read his 2-volume work on justification. It is a benchmark, a landmark piece, in my opinion. It is so good. I have very, very few problems with it. There are a couple of footnotes that I get a little cringe over, but besides that, I mean, it's just an incredible book, or 2-volume work. So that's a tangent. But anyways, Michael Horton is so good at just anchoring himself in tradition. I love the fact that the White Horse Inn is going to be celebrating this wonderful creed that I hate the way it came together. I don't like it when the fact that the emperor called it and was getting involved. And I mean, it was I guess is a good way to illustrate the fact that God drew a straight line with a crooked stick.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, this is one of those ones where the end justifies the means, huh?
Well, the way I would say is God brought good out of evil.
Well, let's ask this. I'll take the opposite side of that. Could the Nicene Creed have been improved on?
For what it was? Well, in a way it was. The Creed of Nicaea is different than the Nicene Creed. So the Nicene Creed that most churches recite is actually the Nicene Constantinopolitan Creed.
Right. It's
of 381. So there's a difference. But so it was improved upon. What I would say about the creeds is they are inerrant but not infallible.
Yeah.
Because they're not inspired.
And they can be kind of incomplete too. I mean,
Sure.
Nicene Creed completely leaves out anything about Christ's life,
Sure.
Really. So,
and that was completed in the Chalcedonian Creed.
Yeah. My point is, though, that just like Scripture, the Lord used, sinful, corrupt people that were, many of whom had political ambitions and purposes,
Sure.
and came up with this, the ground of the first draft of this amazing document that
yeah. No, absolutely. And a lot of people, this is worth repeating multiple times. I think I've said this before, but when the fathers showed up at Nicaea, they were going to compromise. That was their plan. So you had the Orthodox, what we call the Orthodox, the Trinitarians. They were the ones that were really incensed by Arius. Arius was the individual who was saying that Christ is not eternal; he's created.
Right.
Most of the people were moderates. They were like, well, tomato, and they had not heard what Arius was saying. But when Eusebius of Nicomedia, not the historian, but a different individual, stood up and read Arius's doctrine. Arius couldn't do it because he was merely a presbyter; he wasn't a bishop. So when Eusebius of Nicomedia read that, that was when they heard for the first time what Arius was saying, and all of them began shouting "heretic." And one ran up and grabbed the speech, threw it on the ground, and I think, if I remember correctly, the person that did that was Saint Nicholas, Santa Claus.
Wow.
Yeah, he went and grabbed his speech, threw it on the ground, and then that's when everybody just sort of turned on the Arians, because when they found out what Arius was saying about Christ, it's over. So it's not like it was a close vote or anything. The Trinitarians overwhelmingly just said Arius is way out of bounds.
Yeah.
Do something about this. And so a lot of people don't appreciate that about the creed. It really was the unanimous consent of the fathers. But unfortunately, I can't elaborate because we're out of time.
We're out of time. It stinks. Who set this up? I got to go tune them up.
I will see you next week, my friend.
All right, Travis. God bless you. Have a great week. And always love doing this. See ya.